Hi, welcome to Punchline Talks Politics. Today, my special guest is Councillor Jeremy Hilton. He's the leader of the Liberal Democrats for Gloucester City Council. Thanks for joining us this morning, Jeremy. Last night, there was a big meeting at the council. We had the BBC Radio Gloucestershire there. We had BBC Steve Nibbs there as well. All the big guns were there. I've never seen the council so full. How do you think it went?
Well, I think it was well worth having that meeting. It was a Liberal Democrat group that called for the extraordinary council meeting, so we're pleased that it took place, and we're pleased that we had a vigorous debate about the what's gone wrong and why the leisure centres were closed dramatically on the 29th of September, but also discussions about the future, and I think that was well worthwhile. I think
there's an accusation there from both sides really that the city council were sleeping at the wheel. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Is it the council fault? Is that how you see Gloucester City Council when actually Aspire runs its own affairs really?
I think that the issue is that Gloucester City Council set up the trust back in 2008, and they should have had oversight. The administration, they've been in power throughout that time, looking at how the contract was running, and they should have taken action much earlier to consider taking on a new provider, and they didn't do that. It's interesting that the tender documents for a new provider were planned for this month. They've been delayed a bit because of the crisis, but that is a time that's after the end of the old contract. So I think there's a lot of problems that went on. We've got a lot of questions still to ask over the next few weeks to find out precisely what went wrong. So we need to learn from that, and we need to make sure that we don't make the same mistakes again. I'm not convinced that outsourcing every council service is the best way to run services. It makes it very difficult to keep a tab on it, particularly for backbenchers, because so much of the information, that's confidential, we can't give that information out, we can't give that report out because it's confidential. In the old days, when you had a committee structure, or when you were running in-house services, you've got a lot more information about the performance of that service, and you could make adjustments easily. You can't do so when you're outsourcing things.
Now, the other thing is there was about the pay structure of Aspire, that it was 9.3% pay increases right across the board. Obviously, the minimum wage rise, everybody on a minimum wage, that went up by 9.3%. But also middle management, ranging from around 20-odd thousand to 30,000 to even 60,000 was quoted. And then the top management team from around 80 to 90,000 pounds were given a 9.3% pay rise. What's your view on that?
Well, I really don't know all the information on it. I've seen that note in the Hazelwood report that there was a 9.3% pay rise all told, and I've seen some committees, but we've not had any background information. So I don't know all the facts behind it. I don't know whether the staff had not had a pay rise the year before that. So until I've got all the facts, I really don't want to comment on it. But I don't think that's the reason why Aspire went into liquidation. I think the real issue was about them not being able to get a new bond for their pensions that they needed to have to carry on trading, and the company was quite clearly in the red. The council over the years has been squeezing the funding that it provided to the point where it got to zero, and of course they were hit hard by things like the pandemic and then the heating costs and other things. So it got into a very difficult situation for Aspire. So it might be that they could have ran the thing better. I mean, again, I think it might have been better to run it in-house. That's something that we need to consider in the future.
I mean, when you say about scrutiny, one of the things I was quite surprised at last night was that the chief executive wasn't there from Aspire to answer any questions. And you say that there's going to be, or they said yesterday that they'll investigate it afterwards. But will that really take part? Will that really take place? Will you all really scrutinise the figures afterwards?
Well, I've got a lot of documentation that I didn't have before, and I've got a lot of questions to ask over the next few weeks, and I know my colleagues have as well. So we'll get more information out about what went wrong. I know the chair of the scrutiny committee has written to and request that Andy Lewis and Philip Walker, the officer on the council, attend the next scrutiny committee to explain things in more detail, where we can do some more questioning about what precisely went wrong. But it does seem to me that the administration really didn't get to grips with the problem. 2 years ago, they knew that the contract was coming to an end. They knew the finances of Aspire were very tenuous. They needed either give support and guarantees to allow them to continue. And they really should have started looking for a new provider some time ago. And as my colleague Sarah Sawyer said, they were not procurement ready. The council was planning to procure a new long-term provider as from this month. That's after the old contract ended. That shows the council administration asleep and not on the job.
What about the
They should have
accusation?
been working much harder in advance on
What
this.
about the accusation from the Tory side of the fence that the overview and scrutiny committee didn't do their job properly? It was obviously levelled at yourself and to Sebastian. You've been on this scrutiny oversight and scrutiny committee for years, and yet you guys hadn't had a meeting with them for 4 years. Was the accusation?
Now that's the
Aspire.
accusation. Aspire, and last time Aspire came, the presentation was just a bland marketing documentation. It's very difficult to dig in the detail on. You can't look at the management accounts to see what the state of the company. All you get is the headline stuff. It's really impossible to properly scrutinize an outside body like that. The cabinet can do that. The cabinet can get those confidential bits of information. The cabinet will have had that confidential bits of information. And when I was a cabinet member at Shire Hall, I did the scrutiny and the challenge and made sure that we got everything right. What's happened here is the cabinet, the clique of 5 people that run Gloucester City Council, didn't do their job. They're trying to deflect blame to others. Let's make it quite clear the scrutiny committee is very much a toothless. It's a backbench committee. It's populated by a majority of Conservative councillors. The committee makes its own decisions on what it puts on the agenda, and none of the Conservatives have asked for this to go on the agenda either. So I think the real issue is, and the other most effective way of challenging the cabinet is to ask questions at council and to ask questions at cabinet. And I did so the other day to Andy Lewis.
Do you think Andy Lewis should resign?
Well, I think he should have apologised on behalf of his administration, and he didn't do so. And we had a vote on that. I'm not sure he's entirely to blame. When I had a briefing about Aspire earlier this year, when I was told about the situation, but and I was asked to hold it in confidence, it wasn't Andy Lewis that came to present the facts. It was Hannah Norman. But I've got a letter here from Andy Lewis where he quite clearly on the 7th, I think it was the 17th or the 18th of July, had not acknowledged that there was an impasse and acknowledged that Aspire were planning to go into liquidation. So he had about a few weeks over the summer months to sort it out and stop them going into liquidation and the closure of the halves. He did nothing. So he needs to reflect on himself, on his own position, but I'm not calling for that. I just wanted him to apologise, and he didn't do so.
Now, moving forward, it looks like we've got an opening date. What's your final thoughts on that?
Sorry, didn't catch you.
Moving forward, it looks like they're slowly getting it together. What's your thoughts on that final?
Well, I think the important thing is we get our sports facilities reopened and get them managed again. It'll be interesting because we might learn something about how to manage them at a lower cost, because I suspect we'll have to do it at a lower cost. But they need to reopen. The important and the most difficult part of the sporting offer is the swimming pools. Andy Lewis has promised me at Cabinet that he would have these reopened to the public, completely reopened. I'm not talking just for the swimming club, by the 1st of January. I'm going to hold him to that.
Councillor Jeremy Hilton, thanks so much for talking to Punchline Talks today.